Let's go ahead and talk to. I'm going to talk to Josh. I like Josh.
Let's do it.
So far, I like Josh. Josh, you are a he. You are a him. You are from Florida, and you are on the line here with Shannon Q and Johnny P. And it says, if I may be so bold as to read what it says, I have a question for the first mover argument. What is that question, Josh?
All right.
Yeah. So my question is, how does the atheist get around the first mover argument, which is that everything is cause and everything is moved by something, therefore there has to be a God to be that first mover?
I may have a different answer than Johnny. But when it comes to prime mover arguments, I would say that most definitions of God that include all of the omnis automatically negate it. So let's start by what's your definition of God? Like, what God do you believe in? Christian
No,
God?
I'm a Catholic.
Okay, so do you believe in all the omnis then? So omnipresent, omnibenevolent, omniscient,
Omnipresent.
right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So this is how I conceptualize it. This is why that doesn't make sense to me. And it's a philosophical argument. So if you imagine a God that exists outside of, time in the known universe and predates it, right? Then and this God is wholly content in and of itself. It requires nothing, needs nothing, and is definitionally perfect, which I think you'd probably agree to, right? Like, God is definitionally perfect. Then
Correct.
there is no necessity to create. Not only no necessity, there is no cognitive state a God would have that would require him to add anything additional to his being, which would mean that the universe would never have been created to begin with if a God by that definition existed. Philosophically.
Well, right, but one of God's attributes and one of God's desires is agency and sentience, so he could have that love from the sentient agents.
So
So it
there
is a
was so he
desire.
wasn't wholly perfect then, right? So he wasn't wholly self-sustaining and wholly perfect because he had a desire. And if he had a desire, that means that there was something that was absent from him in his primary existence state that required an addition, right? So that means that negates your very definition of God. Anytime he has a desire for anything, then he's not wholly perfect. There's something that is separate from him, that isn't a component of him, that he needs or requires. So if he has needs and requirements, then he is not wholly perfect
He
definition.
lacks. He has a lacking.
Yeah.
A psychological lacking for company.
Yeah, there's something separate from him that is a requirement to him.
Well, his desire is not separate from him. His desire is proceeded from the substance of his essence.
Yeah, I don't even know what that means. I know that that's what you say, but it just sounds like sounds like you're defining that to get around that question, to get around that conundrum.
Well,
And I would also ask. I'm sorry. I would also ask, how do you know any of this stuff? I get that that's your position, but how do you know any of it?
Well, I presuppose using the transubstantiation argument of God.
Cool.
So you presuppose God using the transubstantiation. So we're off prime mover then, I presume. So you don't think that's a good argument anymore? Like, we're shifting to something different?
No, I think the prime mover needs a presupposition metaphysically, because that creator you have to presuppose that creator, since that creator could be the Islamic God, it could be the Hindu God. So you have to have some form of precept to enact the prime mover argument.
So you think that God becoming a cracker is evidence that it's the Christian God?
No, I think that God has a because if you were to not have the first mover, then you would have an infinite regression of movers, which is a logical fallacy.
Well, not necessarily. Like, it could be that energy is like, so you have, the way that I see it is that the only presupposition I have is that, there is something that exists. So, like, something outside of me exists and I'm included in, like, this existence. And it could be the case that energy is the thing that is eternal, right? May not be the case. I have no way of currently knowing. You and I are both on the same footing there, but you're multiplying entities. You're saying
Mhm.
not only do I not like you're saying I do know. I do know, and not only do I know that I know it was this specific God. So you're taking additional steps when we both know the same amount of things. So I don't understand how
Well,
you get
right.
to the additional step. Like I your definition of God to me, I feel as though I explained why the prime mover argument doesn't make any sense, just given that definition of God. Now you say that, okay, well, whatever, we'll move off the prime mover. And I think that you need an additional presupposition in order to be able to get to the Christian God. And you say that that's the transubstantiation, right? Which is, the Holy Communion, like God becoming the body and the blood and us imbibing and consuming. So how do you get there? Get me there with you.
Well, the transubstantiation argument of God is that we have to presuppose the Christian moral onto the opposing argument, because if we weren't to, then we could not know anything, because we could be living in a solipsist world or we could be in a brain of that. Therefore, there must be some form of presupposition to get to a knowledge, or you would either have a circular reasoning argument or an infinite regression of questions.
Well, presupposition is just begging the question, though, right? So you don't find that an issue?
Well, begging the question is when you presuppose the conclusion to an argument.
Right. I know what it is.
Josh, it sounds like you really, 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 really want to have an answer, and you just can't accept that you might not know. It might be beyond your ken. And rather than say, well, I don't have an explanation, I have to have an explanation. So I'm going to presuppose a particular conclusion, and I'm going to work backwards from that. Why? Why do you have to have an answer?
Because if we don't have presuppositions, then we can't know anything. Like, we cannot, as I said before, we cannot know whether solipsism is true, whether we're a brain of that, or whether that we don't even exist ourselves, and everything is just a projection of our mind.
That doesn't mean we can't know anything, though.
Sure, and also, even if that were true, does it make you very uncomfortable? Are you choosing a particular answer because you want to step out of that discomfort zone and have an answer, even if it might be just completely wrong? Isn't truth important to you, or is it just having an answer?
Well, the answer is the truth, and I believe that
Nice.
I believe that you can find no contradictions within the Catholic position, but you can find contradictions in other presuppositional arguments, such as Hinduism and Islamic theology,
Well,
and
that's
atheism.
just special pleading. But I'm still on, like, I don't understand why you don't see how presuppositional arguments specifically for God that assume God is the base of premise one aren't begging the question.
Well, because
right? I understand that we both
every
have
argument is-
presuppositions. Right? My presupposition is just that, like, things exist and I can know stuff about them. That's my presupposition. Your presupposition goes one step beyond that to assume an entity is the cause of that, and that we can't know things unless this entity exists, which is begging the question.
Correct. I think I personally believe in the Platonic concept that anything can be answered by the one, or the monad, which is the Trinity.
Okay, you personally believe that, but why do you personally believe that? Have you chosen to believe that, or what is your basis for belief?
Because I believe there is no other way to answer how there could not be an infinite regression with atheism, and also because the Christian standpoint compared to other theologies has no contradictions.
Okay,
Why does there need to be a first cause, though? Like, if the infinite regression is your problem, then you're stuck up on first cause. So why couldn't energy be something that is infinite? Like,
well, because
why not?
Because an infinite regression is a circular reasoning, and it's logically established.
I understand an infinite regression can cause circular reasoning. Like, I know all about Hilbert's Hotel. So, like, why are you not? If energy just is infinite in the same way that you're proposing that God is infinite, then that wouldn't be an infinite regression. It would be equal ground. Only we know energy exists.
Well, it would be an infinite regression, because even if
Why?
you were to say that energy is the cause of the universe, there would still have to be a cause to that energy, since of
Not
course
if it's
something
infinite.
can't come from nothing.
Not if
Well,
that's the base of like reality as we know it, and it's the only infinite thing.
well, that is an infinite regression then of energy.
No, it's not. No, it's just energy always existing. Let's say that's my presupposition. I don't know that it is, but let's just say that that's my presupposition, is that energy has existed and will exist infinitely. Always has existed, always will exist, is the base of all reality in the universe. And just like that's the same thing that you're saying for God. So why does my argument have that problem and yours doesn't?
Well, because my God is not material. My God is not subject to material values and physics. My God is above that, and it created those materialism. While energy is subject to that, subject to materialism. Now, if you were to say that the energy
Subject
is
to
not, then that
materialism.
energy is divine.
So energy, so you're
Materialism
saying
is
energy exists in reality and your God doesn't exist in reality.
Yeah.
So it's not subject to the same standards.
You've defined that God
Well,
into existence as having that quality. You still haven't
well,
proven
what I
that
mean
God
is that
exists.
God
Sorry,
is
go ahead.
not subject to our formality of logic. God is not subject to physics. He's not subject to material value. But unless
Okay.
you were to say that the energy is also not, then that would be divine energy, which would also be a God, which destroys the atheist standpoint.
Special pleading.
I don't need to say that at all.
Yeah, it's also special pleading again. You've just exempt your God hypothesis as being exempt from all these things that you're subjecting the atheist position for, or an atheist position to.
Yeah, and all I'm just saying is I could have a presupposition that energy is the only eternal thing, and that energy predates the known universe, and energy has always existed. That could be my presupposition,
Mhm.
and there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually fairly well reality based.
It
Because we
doesn't
both agree
require.
that
Oh, sorry,
it does.
Shannon. I was gonna.
Oh,
Sorry.
it doesn't require multiplying entities, and it doesn't require
Yeah,
additional justification.
and it doesn't
So,
require the
Well,
existence
right,
of
but
a personality as
right.
well.
well, right, but if energy is infinite, then it would be unchanging, and then there would be no potential to transfer energy into generation or generating something that is separate of that energy.
That was a lot of words that I don't think meant a great deal. So I don't even understand what you mean by that. So energy could
What I
just
mean,
exist.
what I mean
Why
is that
not?
energy, if something is infinite, like you
Mhm.
has brought
Right.
energy, then it would have to be unchanging, because something that is unchanging is not infinite, or something that is
Yeah,
changing
sure.
is not infinite.
Yeah, sure. Why
Yeah,
wouldn't
so
it?
then there would be no
Why
reason
couldn't
for there
that be
to
the
be
case?
potential for that energy.
Do you
Why would
think
that not be the
energy is
case?
changing? What about energy
Because
changes?
if something changes, then its value is not eternal.
Energy doesn't really change, though. Energy operates based on mathematical algorithmic formulas that we can understand. So it doesn't really change. It just
So
operates
right, correct. So
physically.
then there would be no potential to have the attribute of causing.
It wouldn't need to be caused if it was infinite.
Exactly. So there would be no causation within the energy's potential, because it's an unchanging energy.
But
What?
energy, but how energy operates doesn't need to change. Are you saying because
I
energy
don't.
isn't just a flat line and can do work, because energy can do work, that means that it can't be eternal?
Something that is eternal cannot change.
Mhm.
So therefore,
Okay.
if energy has the attribute to create, it must always have that attribute, which means that at some point there was a change in that energy to cause potential to create or to generate. So
And
therefore, it
at
is
some
not infinite.
so if something couldn't be infinite if at any point it changed.
Yes,
So
it
then
cannot.
your
That's
God,
Wait,
yeah. Sorry, Shannon. I think you're going there. Go ahead.
So back to what I said initially, you just did a lot of work to
Yeah.
affirm what I initially said. You just said God, you essentially just said your God can't be infinite, because at one point in time he had a desire to make a change and then he created the universe.
Well, no,
So
because
doesn't that debunk
God is
your own
united with
position?
that one essence, which is derived. So therefore, he always had the potential to had the potential to create because he has the infinite, he has the infinality, he has the aseity. Therefore, he does, just because he doesn't enact his desire doesn't mean that he didn't always have that desire. So one of his attributes was to create. That's why he created. But that doesn't mean that he always
So
had
just
to
because
create.
energy, just because something was able to, just because energy was able to like combine enough to create a potential, that doesn't mean that it can't be infinite then.
Well, of course,
Right?
because energy isn't sentient. Energy doesn't have no sentience.
Right. So why does something need to be sentient to create the universe?
Well, because something that is sentient has desires, and something that is not sentient doesn't have a desire.
How does something that is perfect have desires?
Yeah. Isn't something that has desires suggest that it exists in some sort of temporal state, that it exists inside of a timeline? It has a before, during, and an after that desire manifests itself. That there is again, back to the original conversation, that there was a lacking in that God. I know that you said somehow something about manifesting in various things, but I don't understand how a God who exists outside of time and space does not exist in a temporal way can have desires. Something that's eternal can't change.
It's anthropomorphic.
Yeah, God did not change. God never changed. The Bible even says that God doesn't change.
Sure. Yeah. I don't really care what the Bible says. The Bible is written by a bunch of people who are scrambling to try to explain the world around them, and I don't have yet a belief that it is in any way divinely inspired by an infinite being. And if it were, boy, it's a bad representation of what that infinite being
He's
wants.
a poor communicator.
Oh,
poor
goodness.
Communicator. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Josh, for calling in on this one. That's certainly interesting. I'm not persuaded, but maybe I'm just too stupid to be persuaded by that one.